This is the intermediate approach to digital painting using grayscale and overlaying with color. In this process there are quite a number of layers, and each of them may have their own opacity and blending mode set. You will change this as you're going through the process. So as with any digital painting approach, the first thing to do is set up your line art and set the layer to multiply and place it on top. The next step is to create a layer at the bottom called the midtone, and you will use a darker gray color to fill in your subject. The blending mode will be normal, and you will just have a flat gray color. Next, above that layer, you will create your basic shade layer or shadow layer, and that's where you're creating the strongest shades or shadows. You can change the opacity as you like during the coloring process. You want to set the blending mode to normal. The next step is to create a highlight layer above your shade layer, and then use a white color to create your highlights. Then you create another layer, a secondary highlight, and it's the secondary lighting. This highlighting will be the sharper highlighting, usually from the opposite side. So far, all the layers have been normal blending except for the art layer. Now you want to create a secondary shadow or shade layer just above the shade layer. As you're painting, you may want to set the, keep the layer to normal and the opacity up fairly high so you can see where that coloring is. And the focus here is on the major area shadows. So they're actually going to wind up being more subtle, but you may want to increase the opacity just to see where you're laying down those colors. When you're done with that, you want to change the blending mode to either color burn or multiply. Color burn will give you a sharper edge shadow, and then you decrease the opacity until it looks the way you'd like. At this point, you should go to each of the different shading and highlight layers and change their opacity until it looks how you'd like it to look. In fact, that's one of the main reasons why you create each of these shades and secondary shades, highlights and secondary highlights on separate layers, so that you can actually adjust the opacity of each layer individually. Now, if you're highly confident, once you become highly confident with painting, then you can do these on just a single layer. But initially, this approach gives you more control. So to recap the order of the layers so far, you've got a mid-tone layer on the bottom, it's normal. A shade layer above that, again normal. And then above that, a secondary shade that uses color burn or multiply. Then above that is your basic highlighting with normal blending mode, and then above that the secondary highlighting using normal blending mode. Finally, above all the shade and highlight layers, but below the line art, you want to create your base color layer and set its value to overlay. But while you're painting, you may want to set it to normal. In that case, it will look like you're painting a flat colored, your flats. But when you turn the color back to, or the blending mode back to, sorry, not color blur, but to overlay, then it will pick up the shading and highlights from the underlying layers and just color them. Now, one other thing to show you is, let me just show you the effect of this midtone. So I've selected that color and just increased its darkness, made it a little bit darker, and now I'm going to use the paintbrush or paint bucket to fill that in, and notice the difference that it makes in terms of the appearance of the image. And I can change opacity as well to have an effect. And the very last thing that you want to do is create your background underneath all the other layers and set its blending mode to normal. And that's it to digitally painting using grayscale and overlay. The most advanced things that you can do then is start trying to look at the filters and applying those, and you can also use some colored highlights to change the overall color from warm to cool and things like that, but those are more advanced.